chatting with her today in front of all of you guys. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Tiffany when she was a young pre-frosh at CPW at MIT. So Tiff was class of 2010, course 4, with a concentration in urban planning and comparative media studies. And I remember meeting her when she was just a pre-frosh, and she just stuck out to me as someone who is so poised, so mature, so elegant, so smart. I remember she was deciding among several other schools. I think it was like Princeton and a couple other ones, I forget, but we successfully convinced Tiff to come to MIT. And since graduation, we actually haven't caught up in a long time. So I'm super excited to be chatting with Tiffany to hear what she's been up to since graduating MIT in 2010, and her journey to becoming the CEO and co-founder of Remix, which is a Sequoia-backed company that basically, helps with, it's a platform that helps local governments worldwide build livable cities, starting with transportation. Very, very aligned with her course 4 studies at MIT. So that's Tiffany.
And I'll go next. Thank you so much, Wendy, for having me today and as your pre-frosh back in 2006. So I'll try my best and do an introduction for you as well. So I met Wendy when I was 17 and went up to MIT for a campus preview weekend. And we had such a great time. I had actually no intention of going to MIT during that spring, and then Wendy completely turned my mind around to everything that MIT offered, and
Yay.
Obviously her guidance and friendship was part of it. So want to thank you for that, many years later. And so today wanted to introduce Wendy by sharing that she is the co-founder and COO of Senrev, a very successful high-end fashion startup that I've actually honestly met women on the side of the street who were like bragging about their bag to me, and it turns out it's like a Senrev bag. This happened to me at a conference a couple months ago, and since then I'm just really excited to dive in and learn what you've been up to and talk about your experiences.
Yay! Literally, this is just an excuse for Tiff and I to catch up. And yeah, so first of all, I think it would be great. I would just love to hear from you, Tiff. Like, how did you start Remix? What was your journey to founding Remix? What did you do, post-graduation, et cetera? I'd love to hear about that, your founding story.
Yeah, sure. So graduated in 2010 in course 4. I think course 4 architecture is one of those majors where you start off with maybe like 40 people in your first studio. And then by the end, you're sitting in a row of like 10 people who are graduating in the major. There's a high attrition rate. But I loved studying architecture. If those of you who don't know, MIT was the first ever architecture school in the US. And loved.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So what I realized at graduation was I knew that I loved design, but it wasn't just constrained to design of buildings. I was really interested in design beyond buildings at the macro scale of cities, but also at the more micro scale to like digital experiences. So Remix really came out of a nonprofit project that I was working on. At the time I joined this nonprofit called Code for America. And one of the side projects we were working on was actually a way for residents of San Francisco, like grassroots, to suggest better transit routes to the SFMTA. And it completely took off and went viral, and Remix is what it became.
So tell me more about the amazing success you guys have achieved. I mean, you're so humble, but like, it's not easy to get Sequoia to fund a company. Tell me more about that. Like, I want you to brag a little bit about how great Remix has been.
Thanks for the invitation. So I think we were probably the first civic oriented or GovTech startup to actually get into Y Combinator. This was right after our fellowship in 2014. And we were so shocked that YC wanted to take us in, partially because we didn't feel like we were kind of a traditional startup in those terms. And I think what stood out for them was, number one, our traction. We had a paying customer before we even incorporated as a company, which was the state of Oregon. Love the state of Oregon. Thank you for being our first customer and sending us a check. And since kind of going through YC, it really gave us the kick in the pants, me and my 3 other co-founders, to figure out a business model, figure out how to do customer success as basically a SaaS software company, entering a new space, which is transportation and mobility, but helping cities push forward their agendas in a way that hadn't been done before with data.
And how many employees do you guys have now? How big are you guys now?
I think we're right around 65.
Wow, very cool. Yeah, that's huge.
Should we switch gears and talk about?
Yeah, sure. So for me, I graduated in 2009, courses 14, 15. I had a very traditional path in business. I did 2 years of investment banking, 2 years of private equity, and then went to business school at the Stanford GSB. And during this entire period of time, I kind of knew that long-term, I wanted to pursue entrepreneurship. It was always something in the back of my head. I was just waiting for the right idea, the right opportunity. And when I was in finance, I was a shopaholic. Instead of reading the Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg, I was browsing PurseBlog, Guilt.com, Rent the Runway, planning out how I was going to spend my next bonus check. And the problem I encountered as a consumer was a lot of the handbags I was purchasing was either really beautiful, made in Italy, like high-end, beautiful quality, but not functional, or it was really functional, like a long shop bag that's light, or like, a tote with a lot of compartments. But it wasn't, made in Italy, didn't have the status, didn't have the quality and the artistic design of some of the really expensive luxury brands. So I've always encountered that problem, even when I was in finance. And then at the GSB, I interned at Chanel, and I actually did a lot of like research and, work around luxury. I did this thing called the Luxury Trek. I led this thing called Luxury Trek, where we would visit C-level executives across all the luxury brands in Milan and Florence, like the CEO of Hermes, the CMO of Prada, the COO of Gucci. We actually toured Gucci's factories and like watched them hand make shoes from beginning to end.
Wow.
And during that experience, I was like so fascinated by luxury. I learned so much about how they keep their brands relevant, but through all of that, especially interning at Chanel, I just saw such an opportunity. I realized that these luxury heritage brands have zero desire to be innovative. They have zero desire to embrace digital. They have such like a strong heritage that they're not incentivized to change. And they're not incentivized to leverage digital, because they will be a cash cow forever, and they can just never grow, just keep printing cash and selling the same products. But that also means there's an opportunity for new brands to emerge. And I synced up with my co-founder, Coral Chung. She was also GSB. She's class of 2011. And she and I just started brainstorming different ideas. And we went back and forth on a lot of different categories and decided that we wanted to investigate the handbag category as an entryway into luxury. And the reason was because, number one, there was a personal pain point that we both experienced, as I had mentioned, where we both were just, having a hard time finding a work bag that was actually high quality. Number two, from an investor's perspective, because I had done, banking, private equity, I kind of knew what the business levers are necessary for a company to be successful. And we saw that handbags it's a $60 billion luxury handbag market, 90+% gross margin, incredible unit economics, no fit and size issues. So you don't have to worry about inventory proliferation the way you do with shoes and apparel. No seasonality. If you hit on a hit shape, that bag can be, a cash cow for decades. Like if you think about the Chanel bag or the Louis Vuitton tote, they really haven't changed for decades and people are still buying. And then we found that handbags are a great starting point, like an anchor category. So lots of luxury brands started with handbags and then they eventually expanded into shoes, apparel, home goods, fragrance, beauty, etc. And we just saw this opportunity to build a brand that started with handbags. And then we interviewed tons of women. This is when I was like at the GSB/graduating. We just interviewed women in our community between the ages of 22 and 55. And we heard about their favorite brands, their favorite designs, their pain points. And it resonated a lot with my personal experience where everyone we talked to said, I love Celine or I love Prada, but I actually use a Kate Spade or a Michael Kors or, something just because it's really functional, but I love these other brands. And so we decided to create Sunrev. This is back in 2015 when we were just brainstorming. We decided to start a handbag company that stood for this modern woman who wants something really beautiful, high-end, high quality, but that's also functional. And that's how Sunrev was born. So Sunrev, the name is French for sense and dream, because we're sensible and dreamy. All of our products are really beautiful, high-end and functional. Let me show you one right here. So this is one of our most popular bags, the Maestra. And what's really great about this bag is that it can convert into a backpack. So you can just wear it as a tote, or you can pull the straps down and it becomes a backpack. And I've had this bag for like over a year and it still looks really nice and new. And it's made in Italy, made in the same factory as Louis Vuitton, Saint Laurent, Givenchy, Balenciaga. But at the same time, it's functional. If it's a laptop, it's really durable, etc. So we launched at the end of 2016. We were very mindful to be bootstrapped, resource constrained. As an investor, I had seen companies get into trouble by raising too much money too quickly. And so we basically focused on the family office angel route for quite a while. And last October, we raised our first institutional round with Norwest Venture Partners. Amazing fund. Love our board member, Sonia Brown. Our entire deal team is all women. And that's another thing, like a big part of the fun part of that starting Sunrev is I can create a brand where the mission is all around female empowerment. We really want to stand for that modern woman who wants to look beautiful, fashionable, but also be really badass at her job. And that's at the core ethos of our brand. And Tiffany, you actually fulfill that archetypal Sunrev woman. I mean, you're so badass, you're so elegant, you're so cute, but just doing so many amazing things and just crushing life.
Well, I was actually going to say, so the last piece of accessory that I really spent a lot of time just like thinking about was my backpack. And I spent about 6 months kind of looking for the perfect one. And it was just so difficult because there's so many variables and I'm like smaller. And so I don't want like a giant, like, turtle on my back. So I'm curious, what were like the small details, or was there like a secret that you discovered that all the other big old brands were not thinking of that you guys were uncovering?
Great question. So we heard through our surveys and our customer interviews, actually backing up, our original idea was to go crazy and create a customizable luxury brand. And we quickly realized through our interviews, this is why it's so important to do MVP testing, like all that lean launchpad, lean startup stuff, like rapid iteration is so important. I'm so glad we didn't spend a ton of money trying to build like a customizable platform, right? Because we heard from customers that number one, they pay money for designers to design their bag because they do care about the aesthetic. Like the reason they're spending $3,000, $4,000 on Chanel is because of the brand and the design, and they wouldn't trust themselves to be designers. So that was number one. It was very important from us from the very beginning that true functionality wasn't the driving point. Brand and design is still the driving point. Functionality and versatility was just going to be the cherry on top. And then in terms of what functionality and versatility meant, we just, we heard what their pain points were, and their pain points felt like such low-hanging fruit. So it's number one, my straps are really uncomfortable, or the straps can only, I could only wear my bag over the crux of my arm like this. It's not long enough to be like a tote, right? That's a big problem with some of these really nice luxury brands. Another problem you heard again is like, it's really heavy. My bag is 4 pounds empty. Another problem is like, oh, there are no compartments. The Louis Vuitton Goyard tote is a big gaping hole where everything just kind of swims around inside. So all of these things were so low-hanging fruit, in my opinion, that we felt like, all right, if we nail the design and the branding, and the status, because ultimately fashion and brands are still a status-driven purchase, right? We understood the psyche of the woman as like, I want to carry a bag because it says something about me. And what's changed about the millennial professional woman versus the baby boomer generation is that we no longer buy things just for the logos. We want to be curators of our own brand, and we want our brand to stand for like, A, I know my shit, I do my research. B, I care about the story, I care about the mission behind the brand. And C, I like things that are minimalist, that are not in your face, that insiders know it's cool, but it doesn't have to have the logo blasted everywhere. So we kind of leveraged all those insights in creating our business.
So Wendy, I wanted to ask one of the questions in the chat box, which was how did you find family offices and angels, and how much did you raise at each phase?
That's a great question. So it's all about, there are 3 categories of people who would give you money. Number 1 is if they want to make money. Number 2 is FOMO, like they feel FOMO. And then number 3 is they want to support you. One of my investors called this category venture philanthropy. And so I started in the very beginning, I started with category number 3. So I went to every single professor that I took a class with at the GSB. I went to ex-bosses, managers who've worked with me. I went to family and friends. I went to people who knew me and who had wealth, who knew me and who had net worth. And for some of these folks, like some of our GSB professors, like they had billions of dollars in their family offices. For them to give me $200,000 was like a drop in the bucket. And so initially we raised about $1 million, like in March 2016, before we had launched in November 2016. And then every year we raised a little bit. So actually not every year. In April 2018, we raised our second like convertible note round, also seed round, like $3 million-ish. And then in 2019, we raised like a little $2 million bridge round before rolling that into our Series A. So that was how, and then in Series A, we had raised 16.75. So that was by far our largest round. But up until this last round, it was very much lean, we literally had like 10 employees up until the end of last year.
And how many employees do y'all have now?
Now we have 15. We're still very small. I mean, our original original plans were to double our headcount this year, given that we're well funded. We're trying to drive growth, capitalize on the momentum that we had built. But COVID has really changed all of that. So I'm really curious, Tiffany, how has your strategy and your daily life as an entrepreneur and your priorities for the business changed in light of the new coronavirus environment?
Yeah, so it's been pretty rough, pretty uncertain. And the reason why is because, well, first of all, I actually stepped into the CEO role in December. I was the COO for 5 years prior. And so I was navigating a new role, and all this craziness hit our first quarter. So at the moment, when I'm not in front of Zoom, I'm like calling all of our board members, talking to other entrepreneurs, founders, CEOs, how to see how they're dealing with it. I know SaaS, B2B, B2G is pretty unique from consumer. And so I think we're probably seeing pretty different ripple effects, but impactful just the same. So one thing that we're doing right now, I think we're a little bit fortunate in that we have about 325, almost 350 cities as customers at Remix across 20 different countries. And on the good side is our customers sign multi-year contracts with Remix. And so we have a little bit more security in that we know cities are not going to go out of business. So that's great. And at the same time, I think what we're definitely seeing is that sales cycles are slowing down. It's like awkward to call people and try to sell them right now because it's such a sensitive time. Everyone's dealing with this hardship differently. And so just being extremely empathetic in every single customer interaction is really important. And at the same time, we've had to do some changes in our revenue planning because that's what the reality is for a lot of SaaS companies.
I feel like you guys were ahead of the game. Like that Sequoia letter got circulated everywhere, right? Like I remember.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So
I've had my employees share on Slack and I'm like, yes, I got that letter in the inbox. I'm on top of it, everyone.
That's so funny.
Yeah. How are you all reacting?
Yeah. I mean, similarly, I think number one, there's just a lot of uncertainty. That's like the biggest issue. Like, I think consumers are panicked, so they're not necessarily rushing to spend $1,000 to buy a handbag. But at the same time, I think this can be an opportunity for us because of a few things. I think number one is any company that has significant brick and mortar and wholesale exposure during this period of time is screwed.
Oh my God, screwed.
So screwed. And any company that has a lot of fixed costs and aren't able to variabilize their costs are screwed. And we're so lucky in that we're still small enough, like we haven't expanded our headcount enough, and we don't have that much physical presence. We only have one flagship store in San Francisco, which is also our office, and we have a warehouse in South San Francisco, but that's it. Like we don't have a lot of fixed cost exposure. And so our strategy has literally just pivoted into, we want to extend our runway, pivot into profitability, preserve cash, and just be as nimble and small, continue being as nimble and small so that we can weather the storm. And if there are opportunities to grow, that's great. But if they're not, we want to be able to be there when all of this is said and done and our competitors have potentially struggled, and then we can take advantage. So literally last week I was just going through my budget and trying to figure out like what are all the scenarios, like if in a draconian nuclear winter scenario, what does my cash balance look like, and needing to make some adjustments today to make sure my cash balance still looks good in the worst case scenario. So we're hoping for the best but planning for the worst.
Yeah, every day is budget day right now.
Every day is budget day. Yeah. Somebody is asking, so for the venture philanthropists, what do they want to see you have already achieved before funding you at this stage? Actually, Anurupa, how do I say that? Anurupa. I had nothing. So basically, we just had a vision and a PowerPoint deck. Because for the venture philanthropists, they are really trying to support you and not necessarily trying to make money. So we would start with those folks. And the way I would position it to them is here, like I had a very airtight business model and like thought and plan around why the business was going to work. Like I shared with them a lot of information around the market size, our unique window in time where, incumbents were all traditional brick and mortar stores, et cetera. And basically kind of just walk through the unit economics and the business model, like had a very airtight business model. And actually, I never used the deck. I would write the deck, like I prepare the PowerPoint deck, and then I would just sit down with my mentors in coffee chats to get them to kind of invest. And the reason for that is people oftentimes like their own ideas better than other people's ideas. So it was better for me to kind of paint a general picture and have them fill in the holes and fill in the details than to present something that was so fleshed out, because then their initial reaction is to poke holes. And so the answer actually is, yeah, we hadn't achieved anything, nothing. We had no revenue, no traction. We had like an idea of what the company was going to do. We had like potential designers that we were going to bring on board, a few advisors. The advisors were really important. Like we had some big wigs on our advisor list, like the old CEO of Gucci, the old CEO of Kate Spade, this woman who founded like Michael Kors handbag business. And we would just like share that we had those advisors on board. And that's it. Yeah.
So we've got another question here. Can you comment on the pros and cons of having an all-female board, from Sally?
Great question, Sally. I think it's been all pros so far, because number one, with male investors, or with investors in general, I think a big part of their participation and engagement stems from their pattern recognition and gut instinct. And when you're a company that targets women as your end customer, it's really hard. It really is harder for like a man to have that natural gut instinct, pattern recognition, level of engagement. We just had our first board meeting a couple weeks ago with Sonia, and it was just so like easy. She totally understood our strategy. She had really great suggestions that were on point because she herself was a potential customer. So she understood exactly how our business works. So for example, let me give you an example. When speaking to some of my male investors, we're talking about how we want to expand our product base. Right now, our product base is very limited. And in order to drive repeat purchase rate, you have to have variety for women to come back and buy more. The men, their initial reaction is, oh, I think that's dangerous. Like, we've seen companies where they expanded too quickly into other products that, their attention was diluted and, it wasn't successful. It's important to concentrate on the base. Versus Sonia, she just kind of got it. She was like, I get it. I see that Celine or Louis Vuitton, they don't have just two shapes. They have multiple shapes. And once you've already established your brand, you want to give that woman more things to buy from your brand. So she didn't even question that. She was encouraging that mode. That's just an example of like a male investor might use their pattern recognition from different categories, and it might not be that relevant. And then another great part was like afterwards, we went and got drinks. And we talked about fertility, like literally our board member, like the associate on the team, we were all talking about freezing our eggs. And our board member, she has had 4 kids. 2 of them are twins. And she shared like very intimate details around her pregnancy and how challenging that was and how she balances work and life with her husband and who takes on child duties while who's traveling. And it was very refreshing, and me, my co-founder and the associate on the team, we were all exploring various egg freezing fertility clinics. And I was just thinking to myself, like, when in Silicon Valley would this be like the topic of conversation in a VC funded boardroom?
That's really refreshing to hear. We have a fairly diverse boardroom in that our investor from Energy Impact Partners, Lindsay Luger, she also has 3 kids. I think she had them before she was maybe in her mid-30s. So it's like really impressive how she's had basically two lives basically. And I've been really impressed just by working with her. And Energy Impact Partners invested in Remix because we really exemplified their thesis around how cities and sustainability are going to be the way that populations are going to grow in the future. And if you don't invest from an energy perspective, how people are going to be living in cities in the future, then you're just going to be behind. So that's been awesome. And then at Sequoia, we've been working closely with RF and also Jess Lee, who was Sequoia's first female partner. And it's been really incredible to get the support from people who I can look up to and can really relate to in a much more fundamental way. So it's been great.
What was the fundraising? I'm curious what was the fundraising process like for you, especially as a female entrepreneur pitching to the VC world?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say it was less about gender, but more about the uniqueness of our space. Basically, we were fundraising on, our vision was that we could help cities move from an extremely analog planning process where you typically, and this is what I also did in school, like a lot of pen and paper, maps, Excel spreadsheets, ArcGIS mapping, technologies that are, a little bit outdated. And then our hypothesis was that if you combined it in the right way, with the right well-designed user experience, you could completely transform how urban planning happens, which we did in the realm of transportation. And the fundraising process was interesting because there were a lot of VCs who were like, we don't want to touch anything to do with government. Government's like crazy, government's slow, government's, all of these things that make it not as enticing typically to venture. And I think that's where we leaned into our traction. We had amazing numbers, and we also had customers who loved us. And so any VC who called one of our customers to talk to them on the phone, they were like, okay, you got something special, I'm in.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, it's impressive. It's, kudos to you. I hate fundraising. It's the worst. It's the absolute worst.
It's a necessary evil in some ways. But if you don't have to fundraise in the future because you've got your shit together early on, then more power to you.
We're trying. Yeah, that would be the goal. But there's always that trade-off between growth and profitability. So it's hard to strike the right balance.
Yeah, never going to go away.
Never going to go away. I'm also curious, Tiff, like you've been at this for longer than I have, actually. I think 6 years now, entrepreneurial.
Yeah, getting there.
Yeah, getting there. And I'd love to hear any advice you have to keeping sane, to maintaining work-life balance. Like how have you grown throughout this entrepreneurial journey? If you could give yourself advice, like when you were starting this company, like what would it be?
Oh my gosh. I think when I first started out, so I always prided myself on being the hardest worker, like hustled day and night. At MIT, I would routinely pull at least one all-nighter a week in the architecture studio. So I was like, I got my endurance, I can do this. And so, I mean, I was on like operating on all cylinders for, I would say, the first 2 to 3 years, like worked every single weekend, would travel nonstop to meet our customers where they are, and would just do like these insane schedules. And I would like regularly take a 6 a.m. meeting because I knew that we were trying to work on the East Coast, and wasn't really paying attention to, personal health, space, self-care, all of the words that were not really words in my psyche 5 years ago. And so now I still work really hard, but I definitely take weekends off. Sometimes I prep on Sunday nights so I don't freak out on Monday morning by not being prepared. I definitely have prioritized exercising. And I got a puppy, which has been incredible. I know you have a puppy too.
Come here. I want to show you too.
Wait, I told Nori to have a play date. No, she's on her own play date because she was gonna like make a lot of fuss, but I can show you on Insta later.
They're the best.
Wait, so who is that? Can you introduce?
Hi everyone. This is Pokey. He's a rescue. He's a rescue Tibetan Terrier mix. We did a wisdom panel DNA test on him. He's like everything. He's like 50% Chihuahua, a little Havanese, a little Lhasa Apso, a little Shih Tzu, and he is the best. And when I am really stressed out, I take him out on a walk or a run. My pups do have Insta accounts. Let me share him. Pokey the Tibetan Terrier. He's actually not a Tibetan Terrier after I got the DNA test back, but the shelter sold him as a Tibetan Terrier. But yeah, he's the best. He's the best decision I have ever made. And I joke about that with my husband all the time. And we both agree that he's awesome. He's brought us closer and helps me through times of stress.
Okay, well, I'll share a photo of Nori. So my dog her name is Nori.
Nori, so cute.
And I got a wisdom panel test from my sister for Christmas. And Nori, she's part Australian cattle dog, part German Shepherd, part Shih Tzu, which is a little bit crazy. I don't know how they all go together, but
yeah, they do. How old was she? Where did you get her? And how old was she when you got her?
So I got her for my boyfriend's 35th birthday, and he wanted a rescue, but he wanted a puppy. So we basically like scoured the entire Bay Area and went to about 8 different shelters and found her at an adoption center at the Petco in Sunnyvale.
Oh, good. Kudos to you for adopting. I am a huge fan of rescues because I think they're just more grateful. I ended up rescuing another dog for my parents after I had such a good experience with Pokey, and she's also just the sweetest thing. There's like an element of gratitude in rescue dogs. Like Pokey looks at me as if I'm going to leave him every day. He has these like pleading eyes, like, don't leave me. And it's the cutest thing.
Yeah, and back to the topic of mental health, I think that's been a huge, huge uplift for me. And it Nori forces me to go outside. I think without her, I would probably just not go outside because I would forget to go outside,
Right.
So that's definitely been an incredible new experience.
The topic so I feel like entrepreneurs don't talk enough about how they take time off. Like it makes me very insecure when I listen to Tory Burch, for example, speak about how she only sleeps 5 hours per night. And I'm like, I can't do that. If I sleep less than 7 hours consistently, I go crazy. I like become this pessimistic, anxiety-ridden ball of craziness. So I'm curious, how much do you sleep? How much do you allow yourself to sleep?
Okay, well, I will definitely try to get to bed before 11. So like between 11-ish, 11:30. And then I'll probably wake up at around 6:30 or 7. But great. Then I sleep more on weekends. So I definitely need my sleep too, or else I just make terrible decisions.
Yeah. And I try to take, to your point, I try to take weekends off. I've always tried to do that. And I find that when I don't do that, I get burnt out like the next week. I'm not as good at making decisions. I'm not as creative. A lot of our job is around being creative. So
I find that I get resentful if I feel like I haven't had the time off and I see like other people in my company taking time off, which is like, obviously like, my employees need to take time off and rest and self-care. And then if I don't do that for myself, then I feel imbalanced. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up as a topic. It's hard to navigate sometimes because you want to set a good example for everyone on your team, but then also taking time off can be in itself a good example.
And I've noticed that your position changed from being a COO to a CEO. How has your leadership skills and development kind of transitioned over this period of time?
Yeah, so I would say that being the COO, I had enough visibility into what was going on and how decisions were made and what our strategy was and why, and like really shaping that. And I had always been the face and the voice of the company externally, like at conferences and meeting our customers. Like our customers knew me. And so it wasn't that huge of a change, other than now I like every single decision rolls up to me and I'm accountable for everything. And so there's a much heavier burden, but also a much much deeper sense of privilege at the same time. And so Wendy, I was curious because you had the COO title as well, and you also were leading fundraising. How, like, what is your JD? Like, what's your job description as COO? Because it's so different for every company.
It's so different. I mean, it's really just like another title. So Coral, my CEO, she's in charge of everything external facing. She's in charge of strategy. She's in charge of kind of like offline, anything offline. So what that means is she's responsible for hiring the designer, making the products, managing our Italian factory. She's the one who brokered the deal with our factory. I mean, Victoria Beckham tried to get our factory to make her bags. They turned her down, but they decided to work with Coral. I know. It's
wow, we have such different lives, Wendy.
Somebody on the question chat said that like, you know, Goop featured us and everything. We actually worked with Gwyneth Paltrow to open up her Goop store. So I got to meet Gwyneth. She's super sweet. But yeah, Victoria Beckham said no because, or the factory said no to Victoria because she didn't have her shit together, and Coral did. Like, Coral showed up with very clear prototypes, exactly what we needed. Like, tech packs were ready, had a very strong argument for how we were going to leverage the factory's unused capacity, because most other luxury brands are through retailers, right? So there's like a fashion cycle they have to follow. Everybody places orders for every season at the same time. And as a direct-to-consumer brand, we didn't have to follow that fashion cycle. So she's just had like a very prepared strategy and rationale for why the factory needed to take a chance on us. So anyway, she's in charge of offline making the bags. She's in charge of like overall strategy, and she's also in charge of whatchamacallit, like external facing things like PR, events, partnerships, etc. And then I'm sort of like finance, accounting, tactical operations, and then everything e-commerce. So once the bag gets to the US, it's my job to sell it. So I'm in charge of our website. I'm in charge of digital marketing, social media marketing, all of our photo shoots, blog posts, like anything digital, and then fundraising, finance, modeling, and then sort of like tactical getting things done. But we're very, like, I'm also in charge of hiring. She's also in charge of hiring. We're both kind of involved in fundraising. We kind of have a lot of overlap. Yeah.
Wow. It's really cool to hear that you guys have divvied up in such a way that plays to your strengths. I feel like that's actually an area of tension for a lot of founders. And for those who don't figure it out, usually means the end of their company.
Somebody said, might be good to have each attendee do a shout out one-liner on the chat.
Oh, okay.
Hi, shout out.
Yeah, so I guess I wanted to, it's 6:13. We've got maybe 17 minutes left. So if you all have been listening and there are other aspects that you want to hear about, Wendy and I are happy to share and answer more questions. I know we've kind of been doing it as we go. We can also just continue chatting. I feel like it's like a podcast. So if anyone wanted to jump in, and you can make sure you toggle it to all panelists and attendees so everyone can see what you're asking.
While we're waiting for questions, I have more questions for you, Tiff. Like, how do you think you've grown since starting the company?
So this is one that I didn't quite, wasn't able to articulate until recently, which is, I think when I started out, I'd never managed anyone before. I'd been like a designer, I'd been like an individual contributor. And so my concept of leadership was, whoever I reported up to in my previous jobs. And I thought that, who I was, I'm very much somebody who wears my heart on my sleeve. Like, what you see is what you get. I'm like very direct, very passionate, and like I can get emotional about stuff. And I thought that a lot of those qualities were qualities that wouldn't be good in a leader, because leaders have to be like really stable and like know exactly what they're talking about and like not show too much emotion, or else it would be like destabilizing. And I think what I've realized over the past couple of years is that there's so many different types of leadership, and the leadership style that I gravitate towards is like one of pure authenticity. And so like the two values that I discovered actually through reading Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead. I don't know if you've heard of that, Wendy, or if other folks in the chat have
not
read it. She has the very
list.
famous TED Talk about vulnerability and like what leadership means in a vulnerable world. And so my two values are authenticity, number one, and compassion, number two. Just caring deep the people around me and just like loving who I get to go to work with every day. Those are the two things that keep me energized, and it's taken me, 5-6 years to learn that about myself.
That's awesome.
Can I ask you the same question?
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to take that and remind myself of that. I will say banking and private equity was not the best training ground for leadership.
Oh yeah. I didn't know anything about what it's like.
You're lucky you avoided that. But I mean, definitely it's all about micromanaging. It's about authoritative dictatorship, fear as a mechanism for motivation. That was what I had learned. So being a leader of my own startup, I had to unlearn some of those bad habits, and kind of really remind myself that it's important to have empathy and authenticity. And I think the thing that's been hardest for me is learning to let go and delegate, and thinking about how to empower people to get like the perfect result. Because I'm such a perfectionist, it's so much easier for me to just do everything myself. And that's not scalable. And that was a really hard lesson to learn, and to learn to let go and to empower others, like set guidelines, define excellence, and provide them with guidance such that they can achieve a really great outcome. It's still an ongoing battle. It's still an ongoing struggle that I'm constantly like looking to nurture. So I'd love to read that book that you just recommended. And then on a personal level, I think I've really learned the importance of equanimity and like kind of looking at everything from a dispassionate view. Like it's actually helped me, Tiff, to think of SunRev as just a job. Because I think for a while, it's like so ingrained in my ego and my identity. It's like every little thing that happens to SunRev affects me emotionally. And I actually made a mental switch last year where I'm like, this is just a job. Like, for example, fundraising, like maybe we'll run out of money. That's a really tough project that we have to figure out. It's a tough project that we have to solve. And if I fail in the project, I might need to get another job, but it's just a job. And it's kind of counterintuitive, but having that distance and dispassionate view around SunRev has empowered me to be a lot better and a lot less stressed out.
That's great to hear. Can I ask what are your support systems? Like, how do you have other founders that you go talk to when you're running into stuff? Like, who do you turn to?
So there aren't a lot of other founders that I talk to be honest. I feel like the founder community, especially the female founder community, is pretty small. And I think there is an element of like, you're scared to share negative things about your company, right? It's always. It's like you have to put up a very strong front to your customers, to your investors, to your partners, to your employees, right? Your employees don't even know like just what could be going wrong. You need to be that optimistic guiding light. You can't freak out. And so I talked to my husband. He hates it. He's like my reluctant therapist. I kind of like dump everything on him. That's one. It's very nice to have him support me. I do have a therapist. I have a marriage therapist. I have a hypnotherapist because I had issues with insomnia last year, and my hypnotherapist was able to help me fix that. I have an acupuncturist and she does acupuncture and cupping. So those are like the service providers that I've built around myself to make sure I stay sane. Oh, and I have a really great group of friends. They're not entrepreneurs, but I have a group of 12 girlfriends, and we meet every 4 to 6 weeks, and we chat about our careers, life, things that we're juggling, like family planning. Like we're thinking, when should we have kids? How do we balance when we have kids versus our career, etc. We should start a women CEO support group. That would be amazing.
So Shuja had a question around what is our outlook for 12 to 18 months, both personally and professionally, and how we're preparing for it.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I guess it's a really good question. I would say 12 to 18 months from now, I really hope we're on the other side of COVID madness and things are going to get back to normal. I am such an in-person type of person that I'm like really hungering for the type of connection that we're all probably hungering for right now. I would say in terms of professionally, I really want to get to a place where I feel like my exec team is off and running and just like humming. I've had to do some, rebuilding of my exec team since stepping into the role. We're also doing a lot of international expansion right now. Just opened up a European office in Amsterdam and a Latin American office in Bogota. And so we're thinking about how does the internationalization in our plan actually align to what it means for public health, So I really do want to see those plans really come to fruition and really thrive. Yeah, so much uncertainty right now. It's a hard question. Wendy?
I think for me, prior to COVID, our plan was always to build this next generation luxury brand, not just handbags, but across a lot of different categories. And actually, in light of COVID, I think we might be accelerating the expansion into some other tangential categories. So definitely product line expansion. We're thinking about, so we've always kind of been global, like 25% of our sales comes not from the US. And I think especially in light of COVID, we're going to double down on Asia expansion because we think Asia will recover faster than the Western world.
Wow.
Yeah. We have a team in Hong Kong. We have 3 full-time employees in Hong Kong. They're just a lot more optimistic than we are here because the Asian countries have just such an amazing authoritarian way of like cracking down on the virus. For example,
I never thought I would hear amazing and authoritarian.
I know, but it works.
In the same sentence.
You have to have that kind of strong hand from the top down to contain this thing. So for example, Hong Kong last week, they got a flood of people coming back to Hong Kong from the US after the US started doing all the shutdowns. And when you land, they give you a wristlet and you are homebound. You're quarantined at home for 14 days. They will track your location if you leave your home. You can't even go for a walk. You can't walk your dog. You have to be home for 14 days. In Taiwan, they make you take selfies throughout the day and send it to the government to make sure that you're home. Like, that's the level of control necessary to control this thing. And they don't even have that much outbreak. They're just trying to prevent the outbreak from happening again. And it's impressive. And prior to the US shutdown, things were already opening back up. Like people are back to normal, but now they're shutting back down because they're seeing people come back from the US. Anyway, so product expansion, international expansion, and definitely continuing to expand our brand exposure. And just making sure people are hearing about Sunrev. We want Sunrev to become a household name the way you know Louis Vuitton or Celine. Shout out to Sophia. Sophia Yen is in our audience. She's the CEO, co-founder of Pandia Health, the only women-founded, women-led, doctor-led birth control delivery company. So congratulations, and we would love to help spread the word. Let us know how we can help you. Any other questions? Thanks, Caitlin. Appreciate the shout outs. What do you read or what do you listen to, read, watch during your free time? I'm curious.
Not work related?
Doesn't have to be work related. Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm reading right now is, okay, well, this is work related, but I'm reading The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Oh, freaking love it. So good.
I love it and I hate it at the same time. Okay, well, I guess I have workbooks all around me. I'm reading The Coaching Habit. Ooh. Say Less, Ask More, and Change the Way You Lead Forever. This was actually recommended to me by my former executive coach. And gosh, well, the things I want to be reading.
I have that too. I have an exec coach, super critical. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's so like that's therapist, dad related to work.
Yeah, but they hold you accountable to your goals. It's a very, I did not know these people existed as a job. So yeah, other things I'm reading, I would love to read more fiction. So if anyone has any good fiction recs, I've been reading, well, I have a subscription to the New Yorker, which I can never keep up with. And I find that I get like really anxious reading about all the news. And then when I go to the fiction section at the end, I'm like, whew, I can take a breather. Ooh, okay. Thank you, Margarita. Question, did you try out other ideas before both of you landed on these ideas? Or how did you know this was an idea worth putting a lot of effort and time into? Wendy, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think, so Coral actually did do a lot of ideas before we landed on handbags. She was thinking about like a shoe that's collapsible. Like she wanted to create like a high heel that could convert into a flat because, you know, a big problem is high heels are beautiful, but really, really uncomfortable. And she just found that shoes was really tough in terms of inventory management because to do one style and one color, you need like 12 SKUs, right? For sizing. It's really hard. And it's everyone's feet are so different. Size and fit is really challenging. So we scratched that. Another idea she was really passionate about was like a nicer breast pump because she was a mom. She had like her first child when like her daughter was 3 when we started SunRev, and she had just gone through the breastfeeding process, and it was like really like how she called it was barbaric, like the breast pumps, and she wanted like a nicer breast pump. But then she was like, do I want to be seen as somebody who like, do I want to be like the breast pump lady? Like, do I want to be known for that? Is that my legacy? And it wasn't big enough for that. And then we landed on handbags and we just kind of like iterated on that. We knew handbags was a category, but like I said, we tested out that custom handbag idea and it didn't resonate through our interviews and customer need fighting. But yeah. What about you, Tiff?
So I think we were a little bit untraditional in that we weren't even trying to start a company. We basically stumbled onto product market fit before we realized that that's what it was, what we were experiencing. So when we had basically built this small prototype for citizens of San Francisco to go and like draw fantasy transit routes all over the city, we Code for America like tweeted about it on Twitter, and then it completely went viral. The next day we got 200 emails in our inbox from planners all over the world who said, hi, saw your prototype, want to use it for my long range transportation plan for my community, and can you please build these 20 features?
Wow, that's so cool.
So that was kind of the moment we realized we hit upon something. And I would say that we were very, very lucky in that aspect. In terms of trying out ideas, I mean, obviously we're not just like sticking with one thing and it's like the whole company, because that you have to innovate. And even though we're a startup, like what was relevant 5 years ago is totally different today. And so we have to keep up and stay ahead of the game. So areas that we're expanding now into we're helping cities design safer streets. So streets for pedestrians, for cyclists, for all ages and abilities, not just people in their own single occupancy vehicles taking up a ton of space and emitting a ton of carbon, where places like, transit would be a little bit of a better use of public resources. And then also helping cities manage all the new bike share programs that are landing on our streets and helping people move in more sustainable ways. So there's a lot of stuff happening in mobility, and so many ideas to try out and test, that it was just like a really ripe area for change and transformation in the industry. All right, so we're at 6:30.
Thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you so much, Tiff, for joining me. It was so nice to catch up with you. We need to do this in person once this quarantine situation is over.
Yeah, so I don't know if y'all in the audience knew, but this was actually supposed to be an in-person event at Senrab at their flagship store, so we will have to recreate that again. Thank you for having me.
We'll have to recreate that, and you guys have to join us in person. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining and for all the great questions.
Have a great night and stay healthy, everyone.
Bye.
Good job.